Gentlemen, welcome to the Be the Man podcast. I'm your host, Greg Denning, the founder and creator of the Be the Man Masterclass and Tribe, where a great group of men get together online and in person at the man camps, and where we have the tools and resources and training to be the very best men we can be, the very best version of ourselves as husbands and fathers and leaders and businessmen. Reminder here before we get started to go and download the Be the Man app. It's out there available, tons of resources, great tool. Go ahead and get it. Today, my friends, we are going to talk about commitment. I just got off a really awesome coaching session with some of my clients. Great people, great session, great reminder about the importance of commitment. And too few of us think enough about it. And I mean that in both senses, that we don't give it enough time and we don't give it enough thought, enough attention, enough respect. My thought is, my observation is that we commit lightly to too many things. We are often saying yes, and maybe you've done this where you say yes to a lot of things that you really never intend to follow through with, right? Oh yeah, I'll call you. Yeah, let's get together. Let's do that. Oh, sure, I'll do that. And nope, you don't. And maybe you do it with yourself. Maybe you make commitments to yourself that maybe you don't even intend to keep, or you might intend, but that's about as far as it gets with good intentions. And good intentions are not commitments. And so today I want to dive into what it means to commit and get it down to a deeper level where you realize, man, it means something. Your integrity is on the line. This is a big deal. And you place a lot of value and a lot of weight on what you commit to. You can say yes to things, but only if you're going to follow through. Again, why not add more weight and value to your word? That when you say you're going to do something, man, you do it. That has meant so much to me in my life. Because growing up, I noticed a lot of people would do that. And it bugged me, man. It drove me crazy that they would act one way and then someone else come and they'd act differently, or they'd say something, in their presence and say something totally different behind their back. And man, that bothered me so much. But then as I got into my teens and 20s, I would end up, falling into the same trap of saying I'm going to do something and not doing it. And finally, along the way, I'm like, man, I'm either going to stop saying stuff or say a lot less, say no more often, or just keep my word. And I'm like, I've got to figure this all out. And so, though not perfect by any stretch, man, I strive to only say yes to the things I fully intend to follow through on. And then if I say I'm going to do something, I do everything in my power to get it done. I just don't want to be one of those men who make and break commitments. Leadership, manliness is to make and keep commitments. So let's dive in deep here. I'm currently reading Dante's Divine Comedy. And as Dante goes through the gates of hell, there's an inscription above the gate on the arch. And it says something to the effect of, abandon all hope, those who enter here. And man, that message is profound enough to have a whole podcast episode. Maybe I'll do it on that one day, about keeping hope and how hell really is hopelessness. That is hell. And well, I've heard, great spiritual leaders and thinkers say that hell is more of a state, a condition, than a place. And if you think about that wherever you are in this life or the next can be a hell if you do give up all hope. And oh man, we can get into that, but that's not the point. Once they get through the gates, they hear the agonized screams of what Dante says are the uncommitted. Now, maybe that's the big picture stuff, right? The big whole life thing. People who never really committed, they were never all the way in. They were just kind of wishy-washy and show up here and there. And that's a big context. And maybe that falls into, well, not maybe at all, it definitely falls into a major aspect of your character and your values and where you stand morally and your whole way of being. But it also comes down to the little moments where you commit to take your wife on a date every week, but your commitment was uncommitted. And what's interesting about that, even that very specific example, is that if you don't date your wife, gentlemen, it's not going to go well. Right? That's an investment that you're not making. And if you don't do it well, if you don't do it regularly, and if your marriage gets dull and cold and starves or slowly dies, or if it really dies because you haven't been bringing romance and love and life to your marriage, you will have the agonizing screams of the uncommitted. Ooh. Man, that's a big one. So let's look deeper in what commitment really is. And there's a way to contrast us that I like to consider is kind of just take it in two different groups. There's the casual and there are the committed. And in your mind, what's the difference between the casual and the committed? What comes out? What do you think of when you think of the difference between the casual and the committed? Because ultimately life can and perhaps ought to be a series of summits. So you climb the summit and then there's another one and you go down and climb back up and you go down, climb back up. And we have one challenge or one struggle or one failure, or one triumph or one objective or one goal after another. And each one tests you. Each one keeps you humble, because sometimes you beat the mountain and sometimes the mountain just beats you. And it keeps you hungry and it keeps you growing. But if you're casual about the climb, about the attempt, about the process, if you're casual about your progress, what's going to happen in your attempts, right? There's a big difference then, and that's where it comes up, like if you're committed or you're casual. So let's talk about you and your roles. A committed man versus a casual man. What does that look like? Think through this. And I mean, we could sit here and I could go through a bunch of ideas, but I want you to go through, like, what's the difference for you? And if you can spend time thinking about this and writing about this, it would be a really powerful exercise. Like on one side, like a casual man and a committed man. What do they do differently? How do they behave differently? How do they think differently? Attitude, mindset, actions, habits, routines, rituals, integrity, what they say, what they feel. And then we can break that down to the roles, right? A committed husband versus a casual husband. And that latter one turns into a disaster. If nothing else, it's just a mediocre existence. Like having a roommate that just tolerates you. How about a committed father versus a casual father? How are they different? Have you been the latter? Have you been casual in your duties as a husband and as a father, as a dad? And it can be a big deal, right? Where you think, oh, well, a committed guy does all this and it's okay, right? But it gets down to the little things. Were you really present? Were you really engaged? Were you truly listening, or were you thinking about something else? And yeah, I'm there except when I can't be, except when there's exceptions, right? But that's the problem with those who are casual. is there are always exceptions, aren't there, gentlemen? And that's kind of been my experience and my observation in my life and the people I get to work with. Like in a busy family life, there are always exceptions and lots of them. There's always something going on. It's an illness one day, and then an interruption the next day, and then an emergency over here, and then an urgency, and then distant family, and then work, and then the world just going to war or falling apart or some crisis or fire. There's always something. And so if you're going to actually get through it and finish things and go all the way, you have to be fully committed. Being casual will not cut it. What about in business? The committed businessman or the casual businessman? What do they do differently? And man, we get to see that all over in the marketplace, right? The committed salesman and the casual salesman. How about in health and fitness? The man who's committed to his health and fitness and the man who's casual about his health and fitness. And finances, right? And the committed investor and the casual investor. That's a good one. How about leadership? The committed leader or the casual leader? One distinction, perhaps that stands out more than all the rest, is that when we are casual about it, gentlemen, it's really based on comfort and convenience. The first indication of discomfort and inconvenience, those who are casual, they make exceptions, they justify, they rationalize, they pull back, they stop, they second guess themselves, they come up with other options, they tell themselves all kinds of crazy stories in their heads about, well, oh, it's different this time, and oh, this is an exception. Oh, I can't make it happen because of this, and on and on and on. Where the committed, they don't stop when it gets uncomfortable or inconvenient. They keep going because they're committed. That's what commitment is. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect. Some of you are like, yes, perfection. It has to be 100%. It's all or it's nothing. And you need to kind of dive in and define what it means for you. Maybe it's a percentage. Maybe like fully committed means 90% of the time, right? You don't have to work out hard every single day of the week. You want to get up early, which I think is a great habit. Maybe it's not every day, but it's most days, and it's working out most days, and it's eating well most of the time. So you decide, is 80% right for you? Is 90% right for you? Is 95% right for you? Or is it 75% would be this massive improvement? You're like, yeah, if I'm doing it 75% of the time, fantastic. But get the parameters built in around your commitment. And I think the important point here is like when you decide that you're going to commit to something, and I'm going to remind you here, like, really, you're going to commit to very few things. It's not a lot of things, because then you're overcommitted and you can't keep them all. And sometimes they start like working against each other. So reserve this deep respect and value for commitment. And then, it's almost like planting your flag on that piece of ground. And you only do it in a few spots. Say, yep, this is where I commit. And you write it out and you plan for it. This is another characteristic of people who are committed. They plan and they prepare. That one's important, because if we're committed and we know that maybe our commitment's going to be tested or tried or put to a challenge, I'm going to prepare ahead of time. I'm not going to wait right to the last minute and be like, oh man, didn't think about that. Didn't see this one coming. Maybe here's another exception. Here's another exception. Over here, there's another exception, another exception. You're like, well, I kind of got in this bind, so I couldn't keep my commitment. If you're committed, you're going to plan, you're going to prepare, you're going to think ahead. You're going to be really aware of what's going on. You're going to be more self-aware and situational aware. And you're going to be thinking through all that in your commitment. So again, it's getting all your parameters. So number one, let's do this. I want you to make a list, and it's going to be a short list of the things that you are 100% sure that you want to commit to. These are things you are absolutely confident will make a significant positive difference in your life. And you can do it with each role. But you got to think through it. You've got to know, does this really matter? Because I don't want you to commit to things that are not of high worth or things you should have never committed to in the first place. And if you commit to something, you get going along and you realize you're wrong, it's okay. It's like, you're like, yeah, I made a mistake. I committed to something I shouldn't have committed to. I'm going to intentionally break my commitment here because it's the right thing to do. So don't feel like you're stuck for the rest of your life if you did something wrong. But be very careful. So get really crystal clear about the commitment you want, right? So it has to be worth it, and it will certainly make your life better. And you have to know that for certain for yourself, that it's of tremendous worth and value. And then you make that commitment, and you might, but then you have to get really clear about the parameters, like we were just talking about, right? Make sure you know exactly what that looks like. So here's one, I'll share a couple of mine. One is, at any point in my life, I want to be able to walk out the door in a moment's notice and run a 5K. So that's just over 3 miles, and be able to do 50 consecutive push-ups at any time. Now, most of the time, I'm in far better condition than that. I just dropped down the other day just to try it out, and I did like 80 or 85 push-ups, consecutive push-ups. And I can go run. I'm training right now for Kilimanjaro and for an adventure race in the Tetons I just signed up for. So, I'm in great shape. I went out running with my wife, and I was wearing a 40-pound vest while we were running. And then I'm on my bike a lot. I'm doing Krav Maga, playing volleyball with my kids. I'm in great shape. But that's kind of this basis, this minimum level commitment that at any time in my life, I'm at least that level. And so what does that mean? It means I'm lifting weights and doing cardio. I'm saying 5 times a week. But then sometimes it's 6 times a week, and sometimes it's twice a day. Like on Tuesday, 2 major workouts, man. I was sore Wednesday morning, but it's this baseline level of commitment. Like, I'm doing this, and I have several commitments about things I will not put in my body. Right. And I'm a stickler about this. Like, I don't drink soda. No way. I just do not drink. It's just, there's nothing in there that's good for my body. So no soda. Avoid white refined sugars as absolute much as possible. Yes, there's some in some of the ingredients in small amounts, but like, especially anything I look at all the ingredients, right? Okay, there's a standard. I look at all the ingredients, and so many of the ingredients in this country, the sugar is the first thing, or some kind of high fructose corn syrup or something like that. Good night. It's mostly sweetener. So I'm looking for natural ingredients and very low or no white sugar, for example, right? And so go through each of the roles. Like, what are you committed to? I'm committed to at least 1 date a week with my wife. 2 is ideal. We as a couple are committed to taking our children on dates, right? And so we take 1 child out every week. We are committed to having family devotionals in the morning around breakfast. We just talk about great stuff. And we do that 5 to 6 days a week, right? So I'm not shooting for 7, because honestly, in that case, 7's not realistic. And if we have 5 some weeks, we're okay with that, because we're still doing it. We're still moving forward. Most of the time we're doing it, which is, if we're not careful, gentlemen, we'll end up with so many exceptions that exceptions become your norm. And you don't even realize it unless you're really tracking it. You don't realize you make this commitment to work out 5 times a week. And then if you track and notice over time, you end up working out twice a week. So it's the opposite, right? Instead of having 2 days off a week, you end up working out twice a week. That's more normal for most guys than not, because there's so many exceptions. So are you going to get up at a certain time? What happens when family comes in? What happens when you're not feeling well? What happens when you work late one night? What happens when a kid needs to stay up talking or some kind of, situation? Like, walk through all those things. So when you make your commitment, kind of walk through it, make sure it's realistic. Like, where do you know your scoreboard, right? What's your scoreboard for succeeding in this thing? And then set that up. So number one, absolutely make sure it is worth committing to, because you're putting your integrity on the line. You're going all in. Like, this really means something significant to you. What are those things? Make a list, will you? Just for you, or do it with your wife, maybe with your kids, maybe with your coworkers, your team, your employees. Man, what a great exercise to do as a business, right? If you're in a small business, you have a team, even a huge business, get your team and say, hey, what is it that really truly matters here for our business and for our customers, our clients? What would make the biggest difference? What would move the needle? What are we willing to commit to? And there's only a couple things. And if we commit, like, we're all in, what are those things? And do that with your business, with your team. Maybe it's a sports team. Maybe it's some kind of organization you lead. What's everyone willing to commit to? And then do it as a family. Do it for yourself and do it as a family. Make a list. And as you think through it, we do home education and world schooling with our kids. So we think through a lot, like, what are the things in education that we're absolutely committed to? What are things in parenting? What are the things in your finances? Just walk through that. Like, what is it that really truly matters to you that will make a positive, significant difference in your life? Quality time with your wife and your kids is one of them. That one's solid. Spending quality time with your kids is a high priority. It's something that's absolutely worth committing to, which means if you commit to it, you're automatically saying no to other things. And so if you do commit, you better be planning and prepared, and you're gonna have to say no to other things so that you can spend quality time with your children and your wife. Whoa, that's a good one. I love this stuff. So make sure it's there. Number two, in order to make the commitment, you have to want it enough to change yourself, to change your lifestyle, to alter your way of being, your schedule, etc. Like, you're willing to transform whatever you need to transform to keep that commitment. And some of you, even listening to this, right away, you're like, man, I've got to do that thing. I've been talking about it. Okay, here's an indicator. If your wife keeps bringing it up again and again and again, if your kids keep mentioning it, if employees or team members or coworkers or bosses, they keep mentioning those things, it keeps coming up. There's your sign. There's your list right there. You know what you need to commit to, and it's going to require some change in you. It's going to require a little bit of transformation, a little bit of adjustment to you and your lifestyle, your way of being, your thinking, maybe your fixed mindset. But it's worth it. It's worth making the changes. If there's something that's incredibly important to your wife and she keeps asking you to do it, and maybe you've even been like, yeah, let's do that, babe. Yeah, okay, I'll do that. Yeah. And you don't, ooh, man, you're undermining the trust she has in you. Big time. That's another reason why this is so important. Well, if you make commitments to yourself, if you're like, yeah, I'm going to get up, and then you don't, or you set an alarm and you're like, I'm getting up at that time, and then you hit snooze button, or you tell people yes, or you tell yourself, like, I'm going to go to the gym, and then you don't, you're breaking trust with yourself, which it undermines your own ability to trust yourself. And then interestingly, it undermines your ability to trust others, because you're sitting there like, I don't keep my own commitments. I can't expect others to do it. And then of course, other people, it undermines their trust in you as well. This is huge. So on a big, big scale, stop committing to things you're not willing to really, truly commit to. If you say something to yourself or to others that you're going to do it. So guard your words, share them carefully, and then follow through. and be willing to change, because in a major way, committing to something is committing to change, to be or become the man that follows through on that thing. Ooh, do you feel that? To commit to something is simultaneously to commit to becoming the kind and caliber of man that follows through on that thing. Whew. Be hungry for it. Want it that much. Next, I think the next step here is to leverage it. Use some kind of big reward or big consequence, whichever works most effectively for you. Leverage it in a way that you have with other things. You're committed in certain things. You've been amazingly committed to certain things. It's just bringing that same kind of power over to the other side of the table, so to speak. Like for me, one commitment I made was like, I'm never gonna do drugs. No way. Just shy of a year ago, my little brother overdosed on drugs, and it had destroyed his life. And I've seen that for years in his life and many lives, actually, just the destruction. And so I made a commitment years ago, man, I'm never putting that stuff in my body. In fact, I went up from there, right? I made a commitment that I would never put anything in my body that was harmful or addictive. I'm not giving up any control at all. I'm not doing it. And there's no circumstance or situation where I'm like, oh wow, yeah, I didn't think about it like that, or oh, it's, you know, I'm pretty bored right now. I'm pretty tired. I'm pretty lonely. I'm pretty discouraged, or I'm really thirsty. So give me some of that poison, right? It's not there. So I've been offered drugs and all kinds of stuff all over this world. You go traveling, man, you're going to get offered all kinds of things. And I don't get there and think, what should I do now? What should I do in this situation? I've already committed. And so I'm not tempted. I'm not reconsidering it. I don't get somewhere and be like, okay, well, this is different. What should I do? I committed. So you can take that level of commitment and bring it into the other areas of life. How committed are you as a husband, as a father, as an athlete, as a provider, as a leader, as a businessman? Now, back to this leverage piece is when you switch it. So in some of the ways where you've been extremely committed already, you've used some kind of leverage, right? Because it matters so much to you. Some of you have made these commitments, whether something happened or you just got this resolve. You're like, that's it, done. You draw a line in the sand and it never happens again. And you can use the kind of leverage, like, okay, what leverage does mentally is it kind of dismisses all the excuses or stories you have. You're like, man, I can't get up early. At least can't do it consistently. I just can't do it. Oh, there's no way I can get to bed early. I can't do it. Well, would you do it for $10 million? Right? Could you get up at 5:30 every morning and start your day with working out and listening to a great book? Could you do that every day for a year for $10 million? Most of you would be like, yes, that's going to happen. And what would you do? You would adjust your whole life. All of a sudden you're preparing for dinner time and bedtime, your bedtime routine. You're getting to bed way earlier. You're blacking out your room and you're getting really healthy sleep patterns, and you're adjusting your whole life. Well, if you can do it for $10 million, or some of you, maybe it needs to be 20 or 30 or 50 or 100. If you could do it for that, then you can do it. And you just adjust your life accordingly. Right? The other side of this, kind of a negative side of like, what if somebody was threatening your life? If you don't do this, you die. And so you're like, nah, just kill me. But what if it was your family member, a spouse, a child? Like when you start thinking about like, it just changes everything, right? If you don't do this thing you keep saying you can't do, then your daughter dies. It's getting done, gentlemen. And we would be able to accomplish unbelievable feats because of that leverage. And sometimes it doesn't have to be that drastic. It's just like, hey, man, if you do this, then you get to take that trip to Tahiti. Or if you don't do it, you are eating 4 spoonfuls of cat food while your kids take a video and post it online of you eating cat food because you didn't keep your commitment, right? Whatever. Or you hand your buddy $500 and say, man, if I mess up or if I don't keep this, it's yours. Or if you want to leverage it even more, you commit to donating $1,000 or $10,000 to an organization you abhor, you hate. It's just opposite of everything you believe in. $1,000 or $10,000 goes to that organization if you don't keep your commitment, right? Use some leverage, make it matter. So you see what I'm saying here? Don't pick something that you don't want to keep and that's not worth keeping. Because if you commit to it, man, you better be all in. So there's kind of a big picture overview. There's zoomed in specific examples of commitment, and it's from you or your family, right? Like committing to yourself, committing to your family, committing to your business, your team, your organization, whatever, committing to the world of how you're going to do life. Make commitment an important part of who you are as a man, and teach this principle to others. Share this podcast. Take a screenshot of it. Hit the share button, share it with friends, family, colleagues. Like, teach this principle so that all of you together can kind of outline exactly what does it mean to commit to something? What are the parameters? How do we know if we have committed? How do we know if we've broken the commitment? What does it exactly look like? And then how do we set up accountability and rewards and consequences so that you're set up together and committed together to get things done? Commit, gentlemen, to be the man.